And now, Deep Thoughts by Brad and Gary.
Hello and welcome to the Not Ready for Primetime Project. We're Gary Seath and Brad Robinson.
And you're not.
This week, we have Deep Thoughts on the 25th anniversary show. This show originally aired on September 26th, 1999. Brad, we have deep thoughts, and luckily, we have someone with us who may have even deeper thoughts on this anniversary show.
Exactly. If there's anyone I would want to talk about this era of Saturday Night Live with, it is our guest this week. It's somebody who I think knows more about the show and all the things behind the scenes and whatnot of this particular era of this SNL than probably half the people that were on the show at the time. If you haven't listened to his podcast, Inside Late Night, you're missing out. For SNL fans, he's got guests like Robert Smigel, Fred Wolf, Streeter Seidel, Wally Firestein, Janine Garofalo, Bobby Monahan, and that's just barely scratching the surface. And like I said, his knowledge of SNL is amazing, and we're so happy to welcome him back to the podcast, Mark Malkoff. Hello, sir.
Thanks for having me back. Nice to see you both.
Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
So the 25th anniversary show was a big event in 1999, I think.
SNL 25.
Yes, SNL 25. It was a big event. There was a lot of things tied to it. Mark, this show originally aired in primetime, right? So this was like an event.
It was. I remember watching it, and I also remember that they were going to do a 20th, but the show was at such a hard place at the time that they wisely did not do that, and they waited a few more years, and the show got into a place where the critics weren't, salvaging it, and it seemed like the timing was good. 25 years. They did the 15 and then 25. It's not the most obvious number, but it totally worked.
Totally. And I think you were right. The show is in a different place now than it had been, Brad. It was kind of on an upswing, right?
It's at a very interesting place. I mean, as Mark just said, you're about 5 years removed from the end of the bad boy era of Sandler, Farley, and Snyder. 4 seasons past the infamous season 20 debacle that a lot of people rank as one of the worst seasons of all time. I remember season 21, they cleaned house, and Quentin Tarantino hosted one of his commercials that week was him, I think, with Will Ferrell and Sherry O'Terry. And she's like, "Are you going to revive SNL like you did John Travolta's career?" And his response is, "Yeah, and then I'm going to bring Dick Shawn back from the dead," which I've always loved because I'm such a huge Dick Shawn fan. But that's where the show was, like season 20, early 21. And by season 23, they're back on the cover of Rolling Stone with Will Ferrell, Sherry O'Terry, Molly Shannon, Chris Kattan, that infamous, cover of Rolling Stone. So they're definitely on that upswing. This cast has really solidified themselves.
It's getting up at the same time. They are not getting nominated for Emmys at all. I mean, they didn't get nominated for an Emmy until I think for this special. And
I was going to say till tonight. Yeah.
So, it was like a long time with the Will Ferrell cast. I think it was like 4 or 5 years in. Even being on the cover of Rolling Stone, I think Norm was bigger than Will Ferrell. I mean, Will Ferrell, it took him a long time, I think, even after maybe a year after the 25th. Until I feel like really the audience was really, really excited to see him. And even that, he still couldn't get a movie made. Him and McKay, August Blowout, I remember reading the screenplay, couldn't get the thing made. So it was definitely up and up, but Will Ferrell was not Will Ferrell by any means in terms to the industry and to him being able to do movies like that.
Yeah, you're right. Norm was probably the guy, and he's a year plus removed from being fired. Like, this is his first time back from being fired. He'll host episode 3 or 4 this season, right? But yeah, so Lauren's gone, and you're just starting to get the kernels of that new cast: Jimmy Fallon, Chris Parnell, Horatio as featured players. So you're, the Will Ferrell era is kind of hitting their stride, and then that next wave is just starting to come in.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point in the show, like you're saying, and the cast is hitting their stride. They also had a bunch of writers at this point who were also kind of hitting their stride, right? Guys like Adam McKay, who had been there. He had been the head writer at this point. Was he still the head writer?
I think when this came out, I thought Tina was okay. They were doing it together, maybe?
I think they just switched. Like he finished
switched.
season 24 and Tina started as head writer in 25. So it's right
Got it.
around the time I think they switch.
Okay. Yeah. So it's kind of the changing of the guard there too, a little bit.
Mhm.
So it's an interesting time to put on this anniversary show and look back and also look forward. And I think, what we saw in the 15th anniversary was very different in that they were very nostalgic, Brad, in the 15th versus this one.
Yeah, the 15th is definitely let's look back and remember the good old time. And I think this one, I really did notice that. Yeah, Gary, like they're definitely promoting the show now. Like we are a thing, with who there is now and who's on the show, and that, and trying to really sell the show now. There was that kind of feel this time of let's celebrate the now, not just the past.
I see the celebration that they're doing as a very kind of a blatant promotion of, to your point, like we are back. We are better now than we have been for a few years. So this is why you want to be back on the show.
I think you're right, and they started really with their own clips from their time. They started with the cheerleaders, which I get people like the cheerleaders. I enjoyed it the first one or the few times, and I understand. I'm more watching for the writing than the big characters and stuff. But it really when they started showing some of those characters like Mango and cheerleaders, I'm like, wow, this show is so different than it was at Anniversary 15 in terms of what they were doing with the writing, and it's different, I mean, it definitely the audience was there and they loved the 18, 19 times, whatever they did the cheerleaders. I don't know, but it was it was very, very different. I think in terms of the writing and stuff, and it was noticeable in those clips, in some of those clips at least.
But as a special, Gary, I got to say, I enjoyed this. I think there's a reason why this one won Emmy Awards and Writer Guild Awards. I think this is a great special. I think they did a really good job of learning from the 15th, what worked, what didn't, how to make clips work, but then how to add enough new stuff to make it work. And I think they hit everything just right in this one. It's a really good balance of everything.
They did a really good job with the live pieces. The Q&A with Hanks, I thought, was maybe the highlight in Robert Smigel's cartoon. But like Billy Crystal killed when he comes out as Fernando. I mean, I thought everything really worked well. Other than I thought the cold open was mixed. I mean, I definitely think it was. It's everybody has this thing with the original cast, and like they did okay. I think like Bill Murray in the Shales Miller book talks about it. It feels like the biggest accomplishment that he made from the cold open was that they hit the right notes for the Springsteen song, and he does. I mean, him and Schaefer get that, and it's like a really hard song to get, but I just thought the open was fine. I mean, there were definitely moments and stuff, but it was okay.
I mean, I think it was interesting to start with Nick the Lounge Singer, or what was his name? Nick Thinblood, right? And you have Bill, and it kind of felt like the audience wasn't really sure what was going to happen here. And he didn't do a typical Nick the Lounge Singer sketch either. He worked the crowd, which I think was different for Nick the Lounge Singer. And it kind of felt like the audience was like, oh, okay, this is something different we have to get on board with. And so it was a little adjustment, I felt like.
Yeah, but I think it's a little bit too, like of learning what works and what you have. So you start with the original cast. Great, makes sense. Who do you put on camera to run it by themselves? Bill Murray, obviously this guy to go to. And you learn from the 15th, the crowd work. Because the highlight of this cold open is not so much Nick the Lounge Singer and the routine. Right. It's him with who's in the audience. It's SNL showing off who's in the audience. And, in the 15th, they did it because Robin Williams was filling time. And so he ran around. And that probably is one of the more bigger known bits or well-received bits. So they're like, let's make sure we do it and do it early. And I think, again, it's SNL showing off SNL. And for that, I think it worked.
The Garrett Morris thing was great. I really, really liked that.
Yeah,
that was one of my favorite parts of that open, I think. And then
Garrett got a standing ovation. Garrett gets a standing ovation. I mean, granted, Bill asked for it.
That's what I was about to say.
He still got it.
He's Garrett Morris. Absolutely.
No, it was great too, because in the 15th, Garrett definitely, he got a little bit of screen time, but not a lot, even though he milked it for all it was worth. But for this time, for them to actually focus on Garrett for a bit was nice, and to spend time with him.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, I mean, they go to the opening credits, which, man, there are a lot of names on those credits.
Yeah. Well, again,
I know they're trying to tell you, like, look, you're going to
Here's
see
our
all of these
laundry
people,
list. Right?
And it was
Stay tuned.
What stuck out to me really was, a lot of those names, yes, were SNL people. Some of those names were people who have a deep history with the show, and some of those names you will certainly not see maybe ever again in SNL. Like, but I don't think we'll see Kevin Spacey at the 50th. I think
I was going to say Vanderbeek, but sure, yeah.
I was going to say Sarah Michelle Gellar and James Vanderbeek are very 90s names that they got in there. But it really was just a laundry list of names of people that you're going to see at some point, and some of them had maybe one line throughout.
They got everybody except they didn't get Eddie Murphy, of course, and then was Dana Carvey there? I mean,
no. Dana was having, I think it was like heart issue. He had surgery or something right before this. I think he had some heart issues
I heard various different things. One of the things I heard was heart. I wasn't sure, but yeah, I think it just seemed like him. And to get Dennis Miller is very hard, but he was there, which was cool, I thought. But yeah.
Also not there, O.J. Simpson. Just want to put that out there.
Yes.
Good to know.
No Jane Curtin either, right?
Oh yeah.
I was literally just thought about that when we were talking about Garrett. Yeah, Jane's not there.
Yeah. No, she's one of the names I had written down is not there.
That's
also
a good point.
Which is odd because she's on an NBC show at the time. Because this is I watched a Minnesota broadcast of this so I had commercials, and so there's Third Rock from the Sun commercials.
Oh, yeah.
So Third Rock was going on at the time.
Right.
It's hard to tell some of the people that were in the audience, like who was there and who wasn't. I don't think they had the overflow that they did for the last anniversary show.
Right.
A couple years, like whatever, 10 years ago and stuff, the 40th and stuff. But
well, the one person who was there was Chris Rock, who was huge at this point, I guess, in 1999.
Yeah.
Yeah, bringing the pain. He I thought he did a great job, and I think he did a fun, making kind of like making fun of the people and the show. And I thought that was a good thing that they had him do that. I thought it was great.
He was smart too. He was short. He was in and out. He had like 2-3 jokes, had his jabs, and left.
Yeah. I thought it was a really good monologue. It was, like you said, Brad, short and to the point, making fun of the show and of the people there, and it was good.
Yeah, some of the worst movies in the history of Hollywood are made by people in this room. He starts knocking everybody. That's good. As Mark said, that they early on make a point of showcasing stuff recently, and so you get Chris Rock, who's only 7 years removed from the show, so he's still kind of in people's mind of what SNL is. And it's just notable. They don't get a Hollywood star, like a big movie star. They go to probably the hottest SNL alumni you could get at this point.
And he was there for 3 years, and he got over with those update commentaries. Who on SNL gets over on 3 years now? I mean, it does happen, but it's it's rare. It's more rare, I think.
To be fair, he was more recently on In Living Color at this point, and then he really hit.
Yeah, he just won. His show just won the Emmy. The Chris Rock show had just won the Emmy.
Is that
just
right?
prior to this?
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, you mentioned Bringing the Pain. Bigger and Blacker came out earlier that year. Right. I mean, he is on fire at this point.
He's one of the top stand-ups at this point. So it's perfect to have him come out and do the monologue. Yeah, it just makes a lot of sense. After that, we get the Schmidt's Gay commercial, classic of the 90s era. And it kind of hits recent comedy or recent commercials from SNL. And then we get Tom Hanks, who I think he had hosted it.
Before Tom Hanks, I remember this when I watched it live. On the outro, we see G.E. Smith with the band, which as somebody from our era, I loved seeing G.E. Smith back playing with the house band that night.
I was never a big G.E. Smith guy. I was always like, G.E. Smith.
Oh, see, I always loved G. I don't know, for whatever reason, that like 80s, 90s, like he just was always the guy in the band. I don't know. I loved seeing him back.
I loved the band. I love that they had a theme song that was consistent, because now it's like, what's the theme song going to be? And it's always, is there a regular song that opens? I like that GE. I always loved they would play before the cold open a lot, this song called A Smooth One. Who wrote that? Charlie Parker? I don't know. But GE's an amazing musician, but he would get criticized for the guitar face. That's what they would call it.
Yes. Yes.
Guitar fan.
That's exactly what turned me off of G.E. Smith.
I was going to say, I could tell Gary's like, yep, that was it.
That was it. Brad, however, loved the ponytail and is still trying to get the ponytail.
Loved it.
Yeah.
But yeah, Hank 7 times, I think at that point he said.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And he comes out and does Q&A with the audience. And Brad, your buddy Lovitz is there.
Lovitz. It's yes, brilliant. The Lovitz bit is brilliant. Lovitz fishing for who his favorite cast member was of all time. Then he's Will Ferrell, and they come back to him later on. But from my era, who was your favorite? Just classic Lovitz.
Yeah.
So good.
I also enjoyed Victoria Jackson's question. And she was like, what happened to me? That was funny.
I thought the Chris Walken thing, I thought that was a very, very strong, the Q&A
very good.
thing.
Absolutely.
It was very good. Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. And then he introduces clips from the current cast. So this is our first batch of clips. And I felt like it was the clips from the current cast felt longer to me. Like it wasn't just clips showing you like set up and punchline and move on. It was kind of, they give you a lot more to chew on to show off.
Trying
the
to
cast.
sell the show.
Yeah, that's exactly how
right?
it felt.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I think you were both completely right on that. And I think that they were at a point where I think that they had that primetime audience and Lauren's like, we're going to take advantage of this and get our current product out. I think you're absolutely right. Longer clips of Mango and that Mary Catherine Gallagher with Gabriel Byrne. I mean, it's so funny and such good physical comedy and stuff. There was a lot of good stuff in those clips, but they definitely felt like that. Yeah, they were trying to showcase.
You got to remember too, like, where is the show at 25? Like Mark, you said Will Ferrell is not Hollywood bankable Will Ferrell at this point. Like the show is only 3 seasons removed from legitimately possibly being canceled. Like I think they have to sell the show right now to people who may not have tuned in for the last few seasons and be like, we are good, right?
I think people were tuning in for Norm. I think Smigel's cartoons were a big one. And I think, I think it just took a while for anybody in that cast to really, really break in terms of like a star and stuff. It just took a while. And they finally figured it out and they started winning Emmys and, but it definitely at that time, I don't think that there was anybody that was there at the time that was a really huge star.
No, I don't think there was. And I think you kind of felt that with the audience reaction to the clips too. I felt like there was a better reaction when we saw clips from 75 to 80.
Yeah.
Maybe 80 to 85. Right. So we do see clips of all of the other eras of the show. And it just felt like there was a greater appreciation for those nostalgic pieces, really.
Well, I think they do a better job with the clips, Gary, like you're saying. And I think 10 years more shows just gives you that more to pull from. Because I think that they did a better job of picking clips and length of clips. Maybe not like you said for this first era, but after that, I feel like the clips are shorter and tighter. And overall, I think they did a great job of highlighting. Every era was highlighted really well, and you didn't get overburdened by particular characters or stuff. And I thought they did a great job with the highlight packages.
I thought so too. I thought the highlight packages, I think overall, I know I was kind of like nitpicking a little bit with the open and stuff, but I think overall and just like the people that they put together, David Bowie and Seinfeld, I thought it was just a lot of fun, the show.
Yeah.
I thought that they did a really, really solid job. Beth McCarthy Miller.
Yeah. The clips were, I thought, interesting. We spoke about this being in prime time, and we saw parts of the Richard Pryor Chevy Chase sketch that I did not expect to see for the primetime audience.
I wasn't sure either. That they would do that, but
It was also kind of surprising to me. It felt anyway, and I'm curious what you guys thought. It felt like there were not a lot of John clips. And I thought,
noticed that too.
Okay. And I thought, maybe they'll have a tribute and that's why.
Mm-hmm.
But then when we see the tribute, it's not it. But it did feel like we were lacking in John clips. And I am not the biggest John fan, as you know, Brad.
I am the biggest John fan.
I know.
I noticed they were lacking, yet didn't miss it. Like, I didn't miss it. Like,
Yeah.
there wasn't anything I'm like, oh, you maybe Cocker, but no, like, I agree. Like, they did a great job of really hitting that for all the eras. I think all the eras did a great job.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I thought, remember, I mean, I definitely saw clips of Belushi and stuff, but I guess they made a big deal about it on the 15th, I remember.
Right.
A little bit more. But yeah, I thought it didn't take away from the show at all.
It was nice. Each era kind of had stuff that won't show up today, probably, or maybe didn't make it to the 40. The early era had the word association clip. The 80s had Billy Crystal in blackface, and the 90s had Iraqi Pete, which are all things I think will not be on the 50th and probably didn't make it to the 40th.
What about Colin Quinn doing Update?
What would I should always be on? I love Colin Quinn. I think he's great.
I think for Update, they showed a bunch of his as well to seem trying to like promote or kind of show the show. What it was currently. Colin wrote some of my favorite sketches. He's an amazing writer. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do with the 50th.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also thought it was interesting, just staying with the clips for a second, the way that the clips were all introduced. Let's start with Steve, Martin Short, and Chevy Chase come out as, Chevy Chase comes out as three amigos to introduce the clips from the first 5 years. Which
you got Chevy and Steve.
No, I know, but I was like,
kinda
but
works.
Marty's right. No,
Kind of. You got 2 for 3.
They went for the joke, not for the relevance. Like,
Right.
Not having Marty do that. And then Billy Crystal comes out as Fernando, and he introduces the clips from 80 to 85. I thought
He
his
basically
work.
steal Robin Williams' bit and does the crowd work. He does another crowd work.
Let's not
scene.
pretend like Robin Williams invented crowd work.
I know.
Billy Crystal did a very nice job with the crowd joke.
Well.
I think
I thought
He did good. I agree. Yeah.
I thought, and he had to work with Gary Busey there for some reason. They decided to include Gary.
I love
Busey
that
in his
Busey's
crowd
there
work.
and he's like high profile. I love it. It's great.
They're
They're gonna make that poor bastard stand in the back room for the 40th. I'm glad he's front and center on 25.
Fast forward to the end of the show where Dan Aykroyd invites everyone down, and Gary Busey's the first one down there to get a photo. But yes, I thought Billy Crystal did great with his crowd work there. And then they have Mike Myers come on and introduce the 5 years that he was on. That makes sense. And then they have Candace Bergen and Lily Tomlin come on to introduce the clips from 90 to 95, which did not make sense to me.
I hear you, but I would rather see those two ladies, even if it doesn't make sense, who have a strong tie to the show, as opposed to stuff they did in the 15th where they were getting like big names like your Charlton Heston or whatever that aren't that tied to the show. I know exactly what you're saying, but I love seeing those two ladies. It was great.
No, I mean, I liked seeing them. It just felt a little forced. That's all.
Yeah.
I want to talk now about some discrepancies between what aired on TV and what's on the DVD that I watched, and I believe Mark, you watched the DVD. We were very fortunate that Brad watched both. So Brad, you and I talked about this briefly before we started recording, but there were whole music packages that we did not see. Correct?
Well, there's a bunch of stuff, yeah, and it's at this point in time in the DVD where they went to commercial and they came back, and Paul, of course. Your buddy Paul Simon, Gary,
of course he
struts out. And he introduces musical highlights. And they did the musical highlights, which of course they don't have the rights to, so we don't see it on the DVD. But they did 3 blocks of musical highlights. One was Paul Simon, 75 to 80. The writer's bit we'll talk on later with Adam Sandler came in the middle of the show, and that actually was a prompt at the end. He introduced the musical highlights from the 80s. And then near the end, they bring out Sting and Steven Tyler, and they do the 90s. And again, much like the comedy bits we saw, like they're all really good. They do them kind of chronologically in order from like earliest to latest, and it's a really good encapsulation. It's a bummer it's not on the DVD because it reminds you of what a touchstone this show is, and for musical artists of like just who was on this show.
Music,
really great.
Music is the first to go. It stinks. Johnny Carson's last show. They have them on DVDs. No, the music montage. It's always it's a shame.
Was there, and I'm asking out of curiosity, was there anything that stuck out to you, Brad, as like being exciting that you saw?
No. It was just seeing it all, like again, because they were using quick clips, they weren't lagging on stuff too long, so they did it again, just like the comedy. Like I said, they did a really great job of just like encapsulating each era of who was on and great moments. It was fun to see.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry we didn't get to see it. Mark and I were stuck without it. We saw a lot of extra commercials and things, though. Correct? That were not on the live
that's another one
broadcast?
too. I think on the original broadcast, the only commercial that ran was the Schmitz Gay in the beginning. But this DVD, which I should say, which is funny, and watching it, the broadcast feed, by the end of the show, they are putting up ads for the 25th anniversary DVD and CD collection. So they already knew it was, because I think this, was a 3-hour show. So with commercials, it's like 2.5. But like I said, they had to take out 3 music montages. So you're down to, 2:15-ish. And the DVD that came out was 2:45. So there's a lot of added stuff, mostly the commercial parodies are the big thing. And there's a Jimmy Fallon thing he does where they take a week behind the scenes. I think it was all from season 24, but that was added to the DVD.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Again,
I'd seen that before. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's, keep in mind, it's 1999. It's not like today where there's people like us like writing about it and talking about it. And like, you didn't know what was going on behind the scenes of the show at that point.
If you forgot it was 1999, watching that montage reminded you that it was 1999 when this montage was made. Very quick cuts and R&B music and very, very late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
Black and white. Yeah.
You know what else they did a really good job with? And again, especially from the 15th, the memorials or the tributes. You know, for the 15th, like Mark was saying, he remembered, they did John and Gilda, and they kind of did their own clip package for them. And I thought it was really nice in this where they just picked one kind of defining moment for them and played it in full. And it was a really nice moment. For John, they do the Weekend Update Irish rant. Gilda, they do a nerd scene. Chris Farley, David Spade comes out and does a Chris Farley show. And Phil Hartman, Love is a Dream. And a lot of times they actually did really excellent segues where for the Hartman era, the last sketch they did was a Phil Hartman sketch.
Yeah.
And then they came back in and it was the cast, and then they did Hartman's tribute. Same thing with Farley. They did a really good job just, again, writing, directing, and putting that all together. The tributes were really nice.
I thought the Phil Hartman thing, I loved that they picked that. I remember watching it with some people that were just like, why aren't they showing something funny? And I remember Tom Schiller talking to him. I was like so happy that they picked that. And he's like, he heard the same thing from some people that were complaining that they didn't pick something with like big laughs. But I thought it was just such a beautiful film. And I thought it was really great. I'm sure Phil was very proud of that. I would think he would have been. Yeah,
I would imagine.
So I mean, I almost teared up watching it with that cast and Jan trying to introduce it. I mean, it's a gut punch. It's just amazing. It's so good. And I mean, and they use it when they use it for her. Unfortunately, later on when she passed, they use the same clip. It's just, it's so good.
Yeah, watching some of the introductions to the tributes, that the Phil Hartman's intro, and he had only passed away 2 years before
2 years
this,
ago,
I think, right?
Yeah,
so
maybe just less than 2. Yeah.
Yeah. It was just about to, because it was the summer, but it was, Lovitz was visibly shaken during this part, and it was tough. You could see that. This is where it caught me that Jane wasn't there because she didn't come out to introduce Gilda. And I thought she
didn't do Gilda's. Yeah, and they had Sherry O'Terry and Molly Shannon, which again, trying to sell the new cast, and I get it, but I hear you. Yeah, you totally notice it.
And then Spade trying to make it funny, but it not being funny also landed a certain way with me, where I was like,
it's so hard though.
I
get it. I mean,
I know. It's just, it was, tough. And then the Michael O'Donoghue tribute we saw on the DVD was not live, right, Brad?
Right. So on the live broadcast, so there's 2 others they do, Michael O'Donoghue and Demetra Vance. And in the live broadcast, they just showed the card for them, like as going to, like they do nowadays, going to commercial and they put the card up. That's all they did in the live broadcast. On the DVD, they each get a little bit of a sketch. Michael gets his first sketch doing his impression, season 1. and Dimitri gets a little sketch. So they added a little bit extra, which was nice, I think, for the DVD, for people buying stuff.
It felt like those were things that may have gotten cut for time originally, and then they added them on to the DVD. I don't know.
Could have been. Yeah, that's true too. They could have always planned it. That's true.
I thought the Mike Myers mini-me Vern Troyer thing was funny, and it didn't get many crowd laughs, but I thought that was amusing.
Yeah, so it was the first of our bits with Lorne, or of Lorne, where it's backstage with Mike Myers and Lorne talking about Dr. Evil. I thought it was funny. I did. And Austin Powers was huge at this point. So it was, kind of hitting on what works.
Because I think the second one was coming out or just come out, right?
Yeah.
So, it was definitely there. Yeah. Again, SNL calling to itself. Because, movie-wise, I think this is the fall that the Mary Catherine Gallagher movie comes out, like a month or two after this. So it's like, again, Mark's point, it's the SNL movie train is not Will Ferrell at this point. It's Molly Shannon. So they're like, remember Mike Myers? He was on the show. Austin Powers, that's us.
Huge movie star. Sandler was a huge movie star. At this point. And
then they do a Saturday TV Funhouse, which just pokes at Lorne the entire time too. I love
this one. I think I've always remembered this one. Like, this is probably the one thing I remember from like my initial watching. I love this Funhouse. It's so good.
Smigel, come on, the best. Yeah.
I really enjoyed how he made reference to the 45th anniversary, and there was some things that we saw on the 40th anniversary.
Yeah. I think he mentioned two things, and we saw them both: Wayne's World and God damn it, Paul Simon singing again.
Yep. It was really funny. I think the intro to that was Alec Baldwin introed that, and he made a point Baldwin. Like everyone who works here has talked about Lorne behind his back or has a Lorne impression because he's the boss. And I thought it was great that they did that and they recognized that too. Some of the other live pieces we saw we did get live music. So
they did a better job with the music this time.
Yeah. I thought so. So we get the Eurythmics come on, and they play a little melody with two of their songs.
Melody or medley? Which would you like to say?
What did I say? Did I say melody?
You might have said melody.
Oh, well, if I said melody, I meant, man, those melodies were hot in the songs that they sang.
Just asking.
Yeah, I thought that was really good. One of my favorite performances of SNL all time is the Beastie Boys with Elvis Costello, like performing as backup.
I like that a lot.
I realized in watching it again, I did not appreciate how good the Eurythmics performance was. I think I had cast it aside at the first time because they hadn't been around. I mean, I didn't acknowledge the fact that they hadn't played in like 10 years. They hadn't put an album out for 10 years. They had a new album coming out. So they were kind of trying to do a bit of a resurgence, but I didn't realize. But aside from that, just like seeing that they did a great job.
They were all solid. Al Green was fun. I liked that at the end. Al Green.
Al Green is a weird one. I mean, it's not Paul Simon, so that's good. But it just seemed like and I love Al Green. It just seemed like an odd choice with like, he only was on the show once in season 11. And I was just trying to figure it out. But the song, I'm Still Loving You, it is a good closing song. So I get that.
It wasn't an obvious choice.
It always struck me as an odd choice, but it somehow does work.
And the crowd seemed to be into it. That was fun. I thought the music, I agree with you, Brad. The music this time was better than in the 15th. This felt a little more solid.
The only thing I kind of thought, not a knock, but just a question, was it was all very looking back, Eurythmics, although I guess they were trying to come back, but they're like an 80s band. Obviously, Elvis Costello coming out to do his infamous song or appearance, when he got quote unquote banned from the show. And Al Green, there wasn't any kind of necessarily hip new artist coming out. And then I realized it was 1999.
Yeah.
And were there really that many great new artists you wanted to show on the show? Right? The late 90s were a very weird time for music. Who the hell was around in 1999 you talk about now?
I love the fact that they were probably able to get all the cast and the hosts in 8H, whereas, the 40th, they had to have overflow with actual cast members and Seth Meyers, which was Donahue and Rosie. And this time, forget about it to try to get that many people in. for the 50th, but I felt like this was 25. It was still nice. You're still getting an intimate type show.
Well, like we had talked about, the 15th was all nostalgia. Let's look back at how great we were. Let's celebrate that we're still alive, right? And the 40th, they're an institution. At this point, the show is an institution. It's going to be around. It is on this holy grail. That's why I think this 25th is really interesting, because there's no guarantee. Like you said in the cold open, they joke around if the show is still around in 25 years. Like probably if you were a betting person, you'd say, no, this show is not going to be around in 20, 25 years. So it was really like there was an energy or a vibe to this show because they didn't know how much more they had. And so, yeah, it was all small. We're keeping it with our people, and we're going to have like maybe this is like one last big party, because we may not make it to 30 for all we know.
I remember when I was going to the show, there was all the talk was they were going to do a 20th and like the Rolling Stones and all of this. And then just during the season, they're like, we can't do it.
Because this is like, you were there, right, Mike? You were there all the time, right? In this era?
I was there for some of it. Yeah. Like, I mean, I definitely was fortunate. Got to go to the show a decent amount of times for dress and air and do some stuff and get to meet most of the cast. If not all of it and stuff. And, I was in high school and then moved here when I was 18 to go to college. And I was it was like my favorite place in the world was 8H.
And thanks to Mark being there, the show rose from the ashes and stayed on the air.
It's probably all thanks to Mark.
I think it was mostly me. I think so. No, it was great. I mean, I was there for Will Ferrell's first show for dress and live. I mean, I definitely was. It was. I really was. It was a huge privilege to be there and to see the evolution of that cast and throughout that season and be around for some of it.
That's awesome.
Do you have a sense then, like, for this era of 25, like how secure footing is everybody? Like, the show, like you said, season 20, I didn't know they were planning on doing a 20th. They were going to do one, they cancel it. They do one in 25. Are they that much better off, do they feel like? Or is it, let's do it now because we might not make it to 30?
I think it's always, it always basically shows in who the host and musical guests were. And they were getting, I thought at this point, they were still getting really big names that were current. And I feel like as long as that was happening and, Will Ferrell and Sherry and stuff, like people still were tuning in and stuff. I mean, it was still, but I definitely feel like, I definitely feel like it didn't occur to me that this show was going anywhere. It just was more for me personally. I was just hoping that the writing would go into a more of a writerly, I don't know, kind of like what Mikey Day and Streeter do, and some other people more with the writer pieces and not as much over the top stuff, but with the character stuff. But I didn't think it was going anywhere. I was just trying to wait for it to go into maybe a style that was more mine, because the show just wasn't at that point, wasn't in terms of the writing, even though they had amazing writers and stuff. I feel like a lot of those type of pieces were not getting in necessarily the show, and it was getting thrust more like Mango, Goat Boy, and stuff like that. Yeah, the cheerleaders. Yeah.
Well, it weren't even the cast saying like the host would want to do that. Like, even it wasn't like we don't want to do cheerleaders.
It's true.
Would come and be like, I want to do cheerleaders.
It was Scott Wolf. I remember I talked about that, and about that with somebody. I forget, one of my guests and stuff. And I saw Will Ferrell and Molly Shannon speak at NYU, and they were very nice to me. I knew them from going from the show, and they were like, Will's like, we don't want to do this. And same with Molly with doing Mary Catherine Gallagher as much. I feel like that was probably the top, the people running the show with were more like than the actual cast members being wanting to do those things that many times. I could be off on that.
It's safe, right? Like if you have a character that people like, and it feels like at that point in the show, they had to do whatever they could to get viewers, to get eyeballs on this set.
That was their formula.
Yeah, and
Oh,
just
yeah.
like drive
100%.
it into the ground as much as you
I
can.
mean, it's like where we are right now at season 4. You know, Gary, it's like it's all you bring the characters out people want to see. You know, it's like
That's the Dick Ebersol.
that.
Yeah, for that point and stuff. Yeah.
It's like they go through those cycles where you get like the experimental or the writing years, and then they get to a point and like, okay, we got to hold on to it. Let's do the characters what people want to see. Your Goat Boys, your Roxbury guys, and then. I mean, would you say, Mark, when Tina comes in and into those early, they do start to get to that writing
I think
point,
the
bit?
view pieces were good, and they started doing more concept pieces. It just took a little time and stuff, I think. But yeah, it was just different. But it definitely evolved, and it goes through. To me personally, like I feel like the original cast, and I feel like from like 86 to 92, 93, it was. And I've talked to writers that were there at the time. It was like that the writers and the active cast members, they worked together, but basically that the actors were there to serve the writers. It was about the written piece. Whereas when this show 25th anniversary is showing, the cast had taken over. I mean, it was not about writerly pieces, and it was that I think it was Tom Davis actually that made the point that the writers were there to serve the cast, and I think that was reflective in that some of that time period, maybe a little bit before. It did change. But that was my observation around that time of what the show was. Overwhelmingly, not all of it, but it definitely had that vibe.
But it's funny because it almost seems like against the cast wishes. Like the cast wasn't dying to do all of this stuff. I feel like the cast would have liked to have done the writerly pieces you're talking about, but they just kept getting thrust into doing the same old because again, like the host wanted it or the network wanted it or whatever.
I'm not really sure. Yeah, I don't know, but
it's an interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting point in the show's history for the 25th, and it's definitely we see a lot of the like we've been talking about pressing for what's current and highlighting that and selling the show, as it were. There is one last bit that we see that in that we haven't talked about, and that is the Weekend Update tribute. Yeah. So Chevy comes out and he's at the desk. He doesn't come out. He's already sitting at the desk and talking about how he originated Update, and then Dennis Miller comes out, and then Norm comes out. I thought it was a good little bit with the three of them and Chevy.
It's a great bit. I love the live bit. It's great.
Yeah, I do too. And it seemed, I think I heard that Norm was like last minute or something. I don't know how much of that was planned, but getting Dennis Miller just seems to say no to so much. I was surprised he showed up. He was there. I'm glad he was there.
It's the only time he's been back, right? I don't think we've ever seen him.
He
on
was
the show.
very public on Tom Snyder saying that he was not happy with Lorne when he was there, and he would not. He said on Snyder, he's like, if they asked me to host the show, I'd say no, and a bunch of things. So I don't know if that played part in. I know that they are cool and stuff because Dennis on his radio show, Lorne was I think a guest, and they're good now and stuff. But at the time, I was surprised that Dennis showed up. I was glad he showed up. I mean, I think in terms of the update, his update's one of the best ever. I mean,
yeah.
It's so great just to watch the three of them.
Yeah,
like you get Chevy coming on, being Chevy, talking about how he created Weekend Update. And then trying to belittle people, calling Dennis Danny and busting Norm's balls. Chevy only shows up 3 more times in the next 25 years, all in cameo appearances after this. Like I said, Dennis's only time back on the show. And this was Norm's first time back since being fired. So you get these 3 like kind of, all in their own right, iconic faces of the show, or at least of Weekend Update, and they play off each other so well. I always remember Dennis's line is like, what is it, like you gave birth but I married her or whatever.
Yeah, you dated her but I married her. Yeah I thought it was
like I spent more time behind this desk than Kubrick in the editing bay of Eyes Wide Shut or something. like classic Dennis Miller line. It just worked so well. And then Norm comes on and his prime Norm, I got invited.
Going to Eddie Murphy's. He's making fun of the show. Yeah.
So, we should say again, Eddie Murphy, 0 for 2. He wasn't there in the 15th because of Billy Crystal, and now he wasn't at the 25th because of the allegedly, right, the David Spade Hollywood Minute line, right? Is that the story?
I didn't know that that's why. I mean, I knew he was upset, but that would make sense, I guess, for the timing. That could have been it.
Well, it's interesting because then we go through clips of Weekend Update, and there are a lot of Colin Quinn clips, who is the current Weekend Update.
That was my point.
anchor.
Yes.
So-
Rights of Colin.
So funny, in the live broadcast, that whole segment is not in it. So on the DVD,
really?
they actually, so on the DVD, if you watch on the DVD, they start with Colin, and they do a ton of Colin Quinn.
Yeah.
And they go backwards, and Norm, Kevin, Dennis, Brad Hall, Charles Rocket are in there, all the way back to Chevy. But on the live broadcast, which, it kind of makes sense, is they come back from commercial and Chevy's at the desk. Hi, I'm Chevy Chase. And then they go into the rest of it, which was all the stuff with the correspondent piece, which I thought was really good and I liked. But they added the whole kind of anchor history from Colin backward for the DVD.
I get that. Yeah, that makes more sense. I was like, for network television, I'm like, he's in a lot.
Yeah.
But that makes more sense that way, that just for the DVD.
And for the flow of the show, because I thought it was a lot to go through all of the anchors and then do the correspondence pieces. Yeah.
It was like weird, here's a bunch of clips, and then you go live, and here's more clips.
Yeah.
It was a little rocky.
Yeah. So that makes sense then.
But it was great because, as we mentioned, Mark, if you're from, I have to remember, but the 15th, they mentioned political, and you're ready for like a Weekend Update kind of clip show, and they just overlooked the whole thing. So it was nice to see Weekend Update get its due, at least on the 25th. Much better than the 15th.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that they went through that they were good with hitting everything.
I think they did a nice job here. I think the whole show was really well done and put together. We had more commercials, like we said, in the DVD than I guess they aired. We had the Schmitz Gay, Oops, I Crapped My Pants.
Clucking Chicken.
Clucking Chicken. First Citywide Change Bank, which was always one of my favorites.
Jim Downey.
That should have made the live broadcast. If you're going to pick one of all these they put on there, that's the one they should have put on the live broadcast.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think of all of these, if you see any of these at the 50th, it would be that, because you're not going to see Schmitz Gay again. 50th.
No, you won't.
And Canis, I've never.
That's a nod. I don't know how that one made it.
Yeah.
Oh wow! Yeah, I remember when that aired. That was a season premiere episode, I believe, when that first aired.
Was it?
I remember. I could be off on that.
I remember seeing it, but oh god.
Yeah, it was pretty shocking to see that at the time.
Right? Yeah, and for
Clucking
it to make
Chicken's a great one.
Oh, Clucking Chicken's so
That's
funny.
a really good one. That's a really good one.
Yeah.
You know, you know what? I don't know why, Gary. I was thinking of the Love Toilet. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, the Love Toilet with Victoria Jackson and Kevin Nealon.
That would have been a good one too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Speaking of things on the DVD cut for time, they actually shot a Hans and Franz pre-tape for this. Kind of a Where Are They Now, or what was the VH1 thing?
That was it. Where Are They Now?
Is that what it was called?
I think so, yeah.
Or Behind the Music or whatever. But anyway, they had shot a pre-tape with Carvey and Nealon, and it went too long, so they took it off. It didn't air. It's on the DVD, and I think it aired for the first time anybody saw it was season 2, the Heather Graham episode. We actually saw it, so it made it out in the season. But that was another one that was on the DVD.
That was fun to see Hans and Franz again.
Yeah, you hadn't seen him in like 5 years at that point, so it was definitely. I could see at the time being like, excited to see Carvey back and Nealon together. Totally.
Yeah. Was there anything else that we didn't see on the DVD, Brad? I think we've hit everything, right?
No, that's pretty much. It was just the commercials, that backstage monologue. Like I said, the extra couple sketches for the memorials they added, and the Hans and Franz.
I think the only thing we didn't talk about was Sandler when he presented, maybe.
The writers. Yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, I got a kick out of it. I don't know, just because I know who all those people are, and I got a kick out of it. And maybe it went on a little too long, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it did feel like it was. I mean, I agree with you, Mark. I enjoyed it. It did feel a little too long, but it was fun. It was fun.
I thought Sandler was
guys.
Great. Yeah, and it was wonderful to see all of it. Yeah.
On the DVD, they cut it out early, but at the end, I think it's Downey whispers in his ear, says something, and then Adam says, "And now we want to show you the music highlights from our favorite decade, the '80s." And so they use it as an intro. But it was good.
It was fun to see them. Well, I think that's the show for the 25th anniversary show. Mark?
And a very good show.
It was a very good show.
I enjoyed it. I do have an episode coming out of Inside Late Night with T-Sean Shannon, where he does share a story from the 25th anniversary involving Gary Busey, going up to Lorne Michaels before the show. So yeah,
Awesome.
stay tuned for that. But thank you. This was fun, and I thought that they did an excellent job, and I'm glad they won the Emmy.
It's great. I enjoyed it so much more than I thought. I think top to bottom, they put together a great show. Like March said, won an Emmy, won the Writers Guild Award. I'm sure it won a few other things. It's top to bottom. They brought great old writers back. Marilyn Suzanne Miller wrote on it.
And Beats wrote on it.
And Beats was on it. So it's crafted. The 15th, I feel like we rambled a bit because the show was very rambling because they were just throwing stuff up and it kept going and going. This was felt like a very concise, thought out, put together production, and it shows. And I think it's an amazing capsule of the show.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a nice progression having just watched the 15th and now the 25th. You see it getting better. And I'm excited to go back and rewatch the 40th before watching the 50th. So it's good stuff.
Yeah.
Mark, thank you again for joining us. This was wonderful as always.
Hey, thanks
I
for
love
having
talking
me.
to you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for asking me back. This was fun.
Do you want to tell folks where they can find you out there on the internet?
I have a podcast called Inside Late Night with Mark Malkoff. It's posted on latenighter.com. I'm working with Late Nighter. And it's been fun. I've gotten a bunch of SNL people. I'm still trying to get more, but we have Fred Wolf coming back, who wrote a lot of my favorite SNL sketches. We have T-Shawn Shannon, who wrote some really, really funny stuff, and he's coming up. So yeah, we'll keep going with it.
Awesome. Next week, we have more deep thoughts, this time about the 40th anniversary show.
This is the last one, right?
We have a lot of thoughts, Brad, and they're all deep. But before then,
Oh, God.
we have Bill Swirsky's tournament talk. It's a big one this week, starting this week.
This is a big one.
We're going to go through the best bits of all time on SNL.
Good luck, Thomas.
Yes. That's going to be a lot of fun. Until then, good night, and have a pleasant tomorrow. Thanks for listening to the Not Ready for Primetime Project. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, please take a moment to rate and review the project wherever you find us. The original music for Deep Thoughts is provided by Jacob Spiewak. The announcer is Jason Taylor. Good night, and have a pleasant tomorrow.